Hello, my name is Mary Kerwin, and I'm on the board of directors with the LIA. You are very welcome to this evening's webinar, which is the first of our two-part webinar series called Financial Pathways Through Childhood Cancer. I'm delighted tonight to be joined by this evening's speakers, Mark Hedderman, who is a certified financial planner and CEO of Hedderman Financial Solutions, an accomplished financial professional with over a decade of experience, and also Stephanie O'Brien, a senior social worker at Crumlin Children's Hospital with over 19 years of experience. This two-part webinar series is part of LIA's Gold Ribbon Volunteer Programme in partnership with Childhood Cancer Ireland, where LIA members have a unique opportunity to volunteer their knowledge and expertise to assist families facing the challenges of childhood cancer. So, to set the scene, every week in Ireland, 7 families find out their child has cancer, which is a devastating and heartbreaking diagnosis. Such a diagnosis often results in significant financial strains for families, including the loss of income and increased expenses, thereby reducing financial stability. So tonight, we would like to welcome parents of children with childhood cancer and members of the LIA, all of whom are eager to gain insights and support through this webinar series. So during the first part of this webinar, Mark and Stephanie will firstly do an introduction to how financial planners and financial brokers could be of assistance. They will also look at how to budget and manage cash flows in the short term when a family is faced with a diagnosis, and households may be reduced to one salary or none. And they will also look at the entitlements, grants and protection benefits and revenue allowances and how to claim them. But before I hand you over to Mark, just a few things to note. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them using the questions and answers icon on your screen for us to address at the end of the webinar. And for LIA members, you will obtain 1.5 hours CPD in categories 1, 2 and 3, which will be applied to your CPD record in the next few days. Now, I'd like to welcome Mark.
Mary, many thanks and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks for joining us on tonight. I'd just like to open by thanking, first of all, the LIA and the CCI for the opportunity to speak to you all this evening in what is unfortunately what is becoming a very prevalent subject matter in Ireland. What I want to do is just walk you through over the course of the next 40 or 45 minutes. The main areas that we're going to touch upon this week are primarily looking at what is the role of the financial planner and broker in respect to the role that they can play in assisting families and kind of guide them on a pathway when they're dealing with a trauma such as childhood cancer. We're then going to move on to budgeting and cash flow management in crisis, primarily focused on the very short-term element of this. Next week, we'll step on looking more at the kind of mid-term and longer-term views. And what we want to touch upon there is just how we can help and assist families and ensure that they are set up correctly and aware of all the various bits and pieces that can assist them and their loved ones while they're going through this very difficult period. And then I'll be delighted to hand over to Stephanie O'Brien, who's going to be covering off the areas such as claiming entitlements, the various grants and whatnot that are available to families in this position, and also the various benefits and state benefits that are available. So if we kick off looking at section 1, running into the financial planner and the broker role. And I think just if we come back, and Mary touched upon some of these points already, but quite a stark number, 353 children diagnosed with cancer every year, 7 per week. And I think sometimes what that number really doesn't reveal to us is that's 353 children with siblings, with parents, with aunts, uncles, grandparents, school friends. So when a diagnosis like this happens, the ripple effects out across the community can be absolutely devastating. And I suppose the number might not seem massive, let's say 1 a day over the course of a year, but it's the knock-on effects for those closest to them and how that impacts everybody. Primarily what we tend to find is it's cancer of the bloods that are most prevalent for children, leukemia and lymphoma. Most common. Thankfully, there are estimated about, roughly speaking, about 6,000 adult survivors of childhood cancer. So thankfully, given the increases in treatments, the clinical trials and tests that have been run over the last decade or so have vastly improved the chances of survival. But really, the biggest thing is, what does that look like next, in terms of for those survivors? So what impact does that have in later life? And as they grow on and they continue in future education, hopefully, get a job, married, family, all the other bits, what impact does that, or what legacy does that leave with them? If we looked at, Mary touched upon it there as well. I mean, we see that in a lot of cases, a diagnosis of this nature generally leads to a loss of at least one income into the household. And again, that could have an impact on average across the state of impacting families at close to €4,000 per month in terms of loss of income. Again, non-medical costs. So children diagnosed with cancer will become automatically entitled to a medical card. But there are considerable additional costs that do apply beyond pure medical. And just looking at these from a very broad perspective, they could be ranging up to €15,000 a year. And this is into things like cognitive therapy, physiotherapy, travel cost, accommodation. These are the things that maybe might not be at the forefront of our mind in terms of what we consider the impact of this. Again, just to touch upon a small point, that Ireland has now aligned with the rest of Europe in respect of treating all patients aged up to 24 as children. This is quite a recent change. Very welcome in terms of the Irish environment, that we're now kind of benchmarking ourselves and catching up with the rest of Europe. If I move on, I suppose, and I've just for the purposes of, I've added a photo of my own two lads into this. And one of the rationales really for this is, any parents out there, obviously we're striving to have the best for our children and our family. Physically and mentally, it's a very, very difficult thing to even ascertain or to try and process in our minds the potential impact of something occurring to one of our children. And as I said, in my own, it's given me time over the last number of weeks preparing the slides and stuff to reflect on this and think about how even myself and my own family will cope with that immediate thing. And we've touched upon it. This is by no means an exhaustive list. And just to flag, in respect of our audience, we obviously have a considerable number of financial advisors or financial planners, but we also have a number of families as well who are currently going through this process. So for the purpose of this, if I've left something out or haven't gone into as much detail, please flag it with us. We're trying to be as kind of balanced in terms of the approach as possible. But what we've tried to just highlight here is, at a very high level, some of the major impacts that people have in terms of the psychological, the physical potential, physical ailments that might occur for parents in terms of just being run down, the osteopathic issues that may crop up from just running on empty and trying to process this. How does that affect for the child in terms of their own relationship with their family and friends in school, within their GAA club, within their sports club, within dance classes, drama, whatever happens to be, all of these other outlets that are so important for the development of a child, particularly when they're at early stages like a sponge. The difficulty of removing all these things all of a sudden can have a major impact. And we touch upon this piece as well around the education. The value that they bring, even from a social skills standpoint, in terms of engaging with those around them, with their teachers and their peers in class. Having that removed, the stigma to potentially for the child not understanding the position and why this is happening, very, very difficult. I think then when we look at it from a parent's perspective, we look at the career aspirations or education bits. And as we know, most families, unfortunately, in this country at the moment, are in a position where they're not working two jobs. They might be working essentially 2, 3, or 4 jobs. And what I mean by the extra jobs is the raising of a family alone at this period in time in 2024 is effectively a full-time job in its own right. So sometimes we find the difficulty with this is that it can seriously curtail families in respect of their career opportunities. And again, there's a massive sense there as a loss of self. So one of the major things of obviously for people educating themselves and driving on and progressing within their own professions is they have their own self of independence. And this is something that can be removed very quickly for a family when they're suffering and going through a diagnosis with a child. And effectively their role maybe pivots, and all of a sudden they've gone from a professional or whatever they were doing in their own profession. And all of a sudden they've now moved into a caregiver capacity. So there's significant change in that respect that needs to be accounted for. Again, elements like lifestyle, their plans for the future, travel, cost, all of these things can go out the window pretty quickly. So any short-term and medium-term plans can effectively be torn up to allow the family to account for this. And one of the major elements of this part as well, I know Stephanie will touch upon some of these areas later, is navigating the various paperwork, the policies, all the various bits that are going on, because as many of you will be aware, Once an issue like this pops up on the radar, all of a sudden you probably spend a considerable amount of your time fulfilling admin roles, paperwork, trying to complete documentation, maybe without all the relevant information, maybe at a time when you're running on a couple of minutes, or if you're lucky, maybe a couple of hours sleep a night. And sometimes it can feel like a very lonely environment. It's very difficult to be able to know, well, who do we reach out here? Who we get in contact to try and assist us with this? And one of the greater difficulties, again, is unfortunately with this, like any kind of news that comes along, the world ultimately keeps turning. So albeit the news might be very shocking and very detrimental for the community around you, most people tend to move on who are external to that family environment. And that can be very difficult in terms of relationship bits where people feel, well, are we not getting the right support that we keep getting for the community around us? So what I wanted to touch upon is just briefly outline the kind of role of the financial planner. And most of the advisors and planners on the call will be very familiar with this, but this is probably more geared towards the families who are joining us. And really effectively, what a financial planner is it's a highly qualified professional individual who's spent hundreds of hours annually researching, carrying out various due diligence, and is a very relationship and goal orientated individual. We are essentially in a very evolving position where we've effectively transitioned from an industry to a profession, and that's at considerable thanks to the likes of the LIA, who's driven a massive education program over the course of the last 20 or 30 years. So for the most part, you will have people who are very highly qualified. You've individuals like myself and Mary who are both qualified with level 9 master's degree in UCD as certified financial planners. So effectively, the benefits for the family is that you're essentially working with people who are at the coalface at a global profession, and those who are constantly striving. And one of the rationales in terms of what we speak to, we get referrals into our own office. And the biggest thing I can kind of give clients or potential clients as a takeaway is our role as financial planners is to help people and families avoid making mistakes with their money. Now, we highlight that in good times. We know when families are undergoing very, very difficult circumstances, as they are when the child is being diagnosed with cancer, you're at a low end, and that's a time when various mistakes can happen. And it's not that the families it's not that they're doing these on purpose, it's that there might be other voices or other individuals in the background driving narratives that may not be appropriate. Essentially, as I said, the role of a financial planner is to act as the family's trusted resource. Be somebody who can liaise with third parties. So essentially, most families, because they're so busy in their own way, build up various policies or pensions, protection plans over the years, or have access to employment benefits. In most cases, what we find is nobody's really quite sure what they have. And the ability for the financial planner to step in there is understand what's happening in the family's lives at that given time, help them understand and break down what's effectively they have available to them. And one of the biggest things is act as the family's eyes and ears in areas where they may be blinkered. So as you're all aware, we get various budgetary changes every year and Finance Act changes. And it's effectively like it's sand dunes moving underneath our feet. We know we get all the high level stuff because it's printed in newspapers, but it's the minutiae elements of Finance Acts and stuff that may be absolutely crucial to families. And these are areas where your financial planner and your financial advisors are absolutely invaluable to come in. Again, one of the core bits around this is that they can provide an honest financial assessment, and that's effectively a personalized assessment for each family. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to go through the hard facts in these things and engage in areas that may not be comfortable for all people, but it does allow you to have a thorough analysis of where a family's current financial situation is. And that looks at things such as income, expenses, assets, liabilities, and unforeseen medical expenses or unforeseen costs, i.e., we all have plans for the future. The financial planner and advisor's role to say, if those plans get derailed, are we going to be okay financially? And our role essentially in that sense is if we can make sure the finances are okay, we can pass back the responsibility to you guys to manage everything else. We look after the money. We'll be able to guide you in terms of that piece. And again, as I said, nothing is an off the shelf. All of these plans are effectively tailor-made. So they should be custom fit, like a custom fit piece of clothing. This is not an off the shelf, and it should be designed to weather all storms, as I touched upon previously. We all have this A to B glide path in terms of we assume what our life is going to look like. And for most of the people on this call, they'll know, unfortunately, we have to stop off at a number of unforeseen junctions along that journey. The objective of the plan is to be there and to be resolute during these very difficult times, and also to be flexible and allow somebody to sit down and say, look, things have not worked out the way we assumed they were going to be. What do we need to do to change? And that touches upon the final point there is most of these relationships tend to work over a very long period of time. I can only speak from personal circumstances. We've a family practice. We're now a second generation firm, and our relationships with our clients go back to 1982 when my parents first started engaging with clients. We're now dealing with the third generation of our original clients, which is a great testament, thankfully, in terms of being able to build that relationship with people. And as I said, it all comes back to those earlier bits about can we be flexible to amend these plans to meet people's life circumstances, what's going on in the world around us, whether it's global infrastructure changes or evolving political environments, and also to help people ascertain and to work out what are their goals for the future. So if we move on, just kind of looking at this from a supporting relationship base, this is probably touching upon both for our financial advisors in the call and also for the families involved, is that, again, this may be a very difficult position, and this might, I know Mary is going to touch upon this later on, in terms of the voluntary program with the LAA in terms of advisors assisting families dealing in these circumstances. But it may be very, very difficult to put your hands on all the relevant information. So one of the difficulties with our role is when we tend to come along, we bombard people and we say, well, initially, we're going to need access to a lot of documentation. And first of all, that requires trust. And I think particularly in an environment in Ireland where there's been so many horror stories over the years, people are very, very conscious of who they provide information to. And I suppose to give the families in the call the comfort that the individuals involved are absolutely adamant about getting the best outcomes for you and your family. It's not about prying for information and trying to source stuff that's not relevant. But the more communications that we can have with one another, we tend to find it allows a trust and relationship to build very quickly. Again, as I said, it does require time and energy. There is input required from both sides. And again, that might be very difficult from a family's perspective when they feel, okay, our life is being turned upside down and we're being pulled from pillar to post. We have various medical engagements and whatnot to take. And in fairness, I think most financial advisors and planners are very flexible in that sense. I recall ourselves sitting at various people's kitchen tables in their own home outside of our own office here, 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the evening. Most people within this business are in the caring profession. They're very willing to give of their time and assist. I mean, the better outcomes that we can get for the families that we work with, ultimately that comes back to us. I suppose we would always take the rationale as such a small community in Ireland. These things tend to have threads. So the better outcomes we can help our families get, it tends to come back. Unfortunately for us as advisors, and I spoke about this earlier on, we are an evolving profession, but we aren't in fact clinical experts. Now, we are very technically sound in terms of our knowledge, and we do work very heavily in terms of our behavioral psychology and our soft skills in terms of our empathy, compassion, and active listening. But these are things that are developing over time. And in fairness to organizations like the LAA, very heavily involved in terms of assisting advisors, other organizations like the FBI, the Financial Planners of Ireland, in terms of running events for advisors and planners to assist them in terms of being able to know, well, what are the right questions to ask and what is the right order and how should these questions be framed and asked of a family? Because again, we sometimes have to step out of our own shoes and try and put ourselves into the shoes of the family who are going through these circumstances. And while we know in the background, okay, we need to gather up X number of documentation, it's all about having that soft approach to ensure that all parties feel comfortable. Again, as I said, small things like technical knowledge is absolutely essential in respect to the comprehension of contracts. As most people will know, they say, well, look, I have a couple of bits in the background, or we have a mortgage, and I think we have a few policies here, and my employment contract is there, and I've built up a number of pension plans, but no, as I always speak, none of these have a Wi-Fi link. And essentially, the role of the financial advisor here is to be able to come in and guide people on this and say, well, look, let's build a Wi-Fi link between your various assets. Let's work out what you have. Let's work out how we can use them for the betterment of your family and maybe dig you out of a hole or provide some breathing room and space. And again, it's really important that advisors are there to sense check these bits with the clients and with their families. It's to make sure that do they need to recommend any appropriate changes? And then can they then come in from a wider scale view and review this and ensure that there's a will in place or there's a power of attorney or that there's sufficient estate plans are up to date. And these are all little bits that will be effectively like a checklist that an advisor can run through with the families. And again, this might require third parties being engaged. And as I said, the advisor's role, and what we tend to find is the advisor's role tends to act as the center point of a relationship. And that allows breathing room for the family. But in a lot of cases, the families in this position might need to engage tax advice, they might need to engage legal sides. And the beauty is that they can nearly almost appoint their advisor to be that center point. And they know that that's a trusted resource, and they may not have the time or the expertise. And it's sometimes just having the advisor sitting in the room for some of these conversations, having a third party there who is not in any way conflicted or biased and respected our views and can give an honest appraisal. And again, one of the larger things, and we touched upon it earlier with the 6,000 adult survivors, is what does that look like for the future? So what does that look like in respect of an education fund? Or will funds be required at some point in the future for treatment? Or do the family want to potentially assist in terms of one of these children as they get older, ascertaining a mortgage or buying a house, and how can they help them on that journey? What I want to touch upon now is just highlighting some of the elements, just in terms of the various benefit packages that may be available to families, and maybe they may have as they speak, but may not be aware of it. And again, as we highlighted, children who have been diagnosed with cancer will be eligible for the medical card, but it is really important that we take stock of other bits that are going on. And again, somebody might say, well, I have a stack of paperwork that thick and I don't even know where to start. And essentially that's the role where you can hand this over to the advisor and in a very trusted environment, know you're going to get this back in terms of one-page documented report. I think one of the key elements, and I tend to talk about this almost verbatim when dealing with talking to other financial advisors and planners, is that protection for a family must be the bedrock of all financial plans. And I use the analogy that protection is essentially the foundations of a house. So if we do not have the foundations, there's no point in us building the most beautiful house, because we know that the difficulty is that there's no foundation rock there. And again, the beauty of something like this is that the advisors are so well versed in the space that they can walk through all of these bits to ensure that families are accessing benefits that are applicable to them. And this by no means is an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to highlight that some of the areas that people may not have time to review is things like their health insurance policies, or if they have a health insurance policy through work. We know this is a really difficult space. I'm actually due to review my own at the moment for my own family, and I'm dreading it because I think there's something like about 285 various private health insurance policies available to us. It's ridiculous in a way. One of the benefits of this is being able to assume, like, if treatments that are not available in Ireland and are available overseas, some health insurance policies will cover some of the costs. So it's absolutely essential that not only are the family reviewing this documentation, but they're engaging with a professional who knows where they can hone in and spot areas very, very quickly to be able to assist the family and say, we have access to a benefit here. This is all about small 1% gains over the course of a child's treatment. That if we can remove some of those minor pressures in the background, it just makes such an easier journey for everybody else. Specified illness cover is a policy that's taken out by a lot of people in respect to protecting themselves in the event that they get diagnosed with a major illness. The policy generally covers people for circa 40 to 50 major illnesses, or what are called life-threatening illnesses. But on top of that, most of the providers in Ireland will also cover what's called partial payments. And a lot of people aren't aware, but when they undertake those policies, their children are automatically included on these policies and can potentially make a claim of up to 25,000 euros tax-free. So that's in the event that a child has suffered from cancer or a major illness. Some of the existing providers relate, and I stress this does come back to the terms and the conditions of the contract. But that's where the role of the financial planner can be absolutely essential in terms of perusing that and being able to assess. We've had a number of occasions where we've come back a couple of years past where within a family there was a potential for a claim and it wasn't pointed out to us. And we were able to successfully make a claim there. So it's very important, if you have these protection benefits, that you sit down with a trusted resource to review them and see what may be available. Income protection cover then is a policy taken out for most people to protect their income in the event that they're incapacitated or unable to work due to illness or injury. It may not seem very relevant from the outset. We know that most families will have to change their working structure to ensure that maybe one of the parents becomes a full-time caregiver. Where we tend to find, and we'll touch upon some of the data later on, is that where we tend to find income protection is not so much while the child is going through the treatment, but maybe post-treatment, when the family has had a chance to catch our breath. And what we tend to find is just due to the strains of this, that certain people are kind of in a difficult position returning to work. the income protection policy allows them the flexibility, to receive an ongoing income from a life insurance company and ensure that is potentially available to them into the future. And again, a difficult area, but most life insurance policies and most people on the call will have a mortgage, will have some form of life cover may be assigned to their mortgage, or they may have some personal cover, what we call family protection. Most life insurance policies within Ireland taken out over the last number of years will provide for a partial payment in the event of the death of a child for amount of 4,000 to 7,000 euros. This is a very difficult subject, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is a really important time when families are under considerable financial strain. And I know Stephanie is going to touch upon this later on about some of the grants and entitlements. But some of these benefits, as you can see, a potential payment of up to 25,000 euros from initial diagnosis will be absolutely essential for a family, and just in terms of ensuring that they have a war chest, they have an ability to take a deep breath and say, we are okay here from a financial sense. Just looking at claims, and most of our claims data for 2023 hasn't come through just yet, but I just wanted to highlight claims for 2022 at a macro level. This is a statistic taken from one of the life insurance companies here in Ireland. Again, what we found is that the companies here in Ireland do not provide a breakdown on claims data for children. They will provide it for adults, but they will not provide it in terms of, well, what were the partial payments and benefits paid out in terms of what was applicable for children. This is something we've been working and speaking to the CCI about even as up in the last number of days about potentially putting together kind of a working study in this. Where we pulled some data from was from the UK. And we could see again, as of 2014, in the last 10 years, one of every 5 specified illness claims in the UK were for children, again for leukemia. So if we're anywhere close in terms of that statistic in Ireland, I think it highlights that the amount of people here potentially could make a claim relevant to one of their children suffering from this illness is very prevalent. And again, it's really important that you engage with a financial advisor or a financial planner to ensure that your contracts that you hold are the most relevant for your family's needs. And again, if any appropriate changes are needed now, it's absolutely essential that that's reviewed. Just in respect to this and some of the softer touch bits that come with some of these policies is that a lot of the providers in Ireland have recently, in the last number of years, changed their structures to provide considerable additional benefits that are seen for kind of more non-life-threatening areas and non-related to pure payments. So we found in the past that I think a lot of the life insurance companies felt here that people weren't engaging on the basis that they felt that they didn't quite understand, well, how does a specified illness policy or life insurance policy work? Most people assume, well, there's only a payment made here. There's only a benefit paid if I pass away or if I get sick, very seriously sick. And again, it's important to note that most providers now have moved and added, again, by not an exhaustive list, but I've added just a couple of the additional benefits that are provided here. One of the providers in Ireland provides a benefit called family care. And effectively what this is it covers off. So for instance, that a family takes out a mortgage protection policy or a life insurance policy to protect themselves, this benefit may be included. And essentially what it does is it covers, in most cases, the policy owners and their children. And the key area around this is it does provide an access to a wide variety of special forms of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, counseling, physiotherapy, all provided free of charge. And a lot of these benefits is bereavement counseling, ongoing counseling for those dealing with family members who may be suffering from a major illness. And all of these are there, again, small 1% wins where somebody's saying, look, what we tend to find in most cases is the parents considerably neglect their own well-being and benefits when dealing with a child. It's as if they're saying, well, I don't feel I can afford to spend a cent on myself because all of our resources are going to go into making sure our child gets better. I totally appreciate and understand that, but it's absolutely essential that the parents they're the engine of the car. And they're the only thing that keeps the wheel moving in the longer term. So it's really, really important that the parents on this call are taking some time for themselves and ensuring that if they do potentially, they can access some of these benefits, that they're taking account of them and that they're engaging again with their financial planner to work out, well, what is available to us through our contracts? Or do we need to amend something to give us access? If I touch upon the second piece around best doctors, this is really, really valuable. And again, effectively what it's a second opinion medical service provided by global experts that covers, again, the policyholders and their families. And again, most people will confer and say, well, look, in most cases, if we're changing a car, we're thinking of going on holiday, we'll seek a second opinion. Have you been here before? What is that car like to drive? Is it reliable? Sometimes, and it's not to say that we're mistrustful of our clinical experts, but we know that the HSE and the support services are under enormous strain. And it doesn't mean that we're not getting the best possible care, but the people providing that care are under major pressure and stress. And what I feel is really, really relevant around Best Doctors, again, at no additional cost, is that this service will allow for families to receive their medical paperwork and issue that free of cost to an external, a global expert in that field to carry out a reassessment. So to work out essentially the diagnosis, the treatment, and what that looks like. And it's not to challenge the Irish doctors or the Irish professionals, but it's just to add a second voice here to say there might be a different route here. And again, a lot of families do tend to find, well, we might seek our own private second opinion. And we all know that you have to go out there and personally source your own experts in that field. But secondly, you also have to go out and finance that. So the beauty of this is that this can have a potential huge impact on diagnosis and treatment if necessary. And again, the beauty of this is it's provided at no additional cost to the family. And it's just there as a resource. And you'd be amazed what may be in some of your existing policies that could be of huge benefit to you and your families. And again, as I said, a lot of these policies, even if they're taken out today, do act in place of pre-existing conditions. So a plan could be taken out today and potentially be accessed in terms of one of these additional benefits in respect of a child who may be already suffering with this illness. Just to highlight then in respect of what some of these claims look like, and this is probably more relating to the parents, and it comes back to that earlier bit that I touched upon, which is effectively burnout, essentially, and parents, effectively running the engine into the ground. And where we tend to see a lot of claims on these benefits, and you can see them here in the far left, is we tend to find that they fall into these areas around kind of mental health disorders, burnout, relationship issues, bereavement, depression, anxiety. So it's really, really important that parents know that they can reach out and potentially access some of these benefits. You can see the cost that was spent by one of the life insurance companies over 2022 was 200,000 euros of their own cost, no cost applicable to the families. And you can see it's really relevant here. The primary one was for cancer support services. And again, it's been able to provide that psychological and physical support services to help people, allow them work out for their own minds to be able to process what's going on. You can see the orthopedic piece. And we tend to find for a lot of people who are dealing with very, very stressful situations, we do find that there's considerable physical deterioration leading on to musculoskeletal disorders, issues with back pains, neck disorders, lack of sleep. Again, all of these things compound on themselves. And it's an absolutely fantastic service to see this in place that you can reach in. And again, that psychological space around the counseling, the psychological assessments, the cognitive behavioral therapy, again, just to allow people for their own rights, the parents to catch a breath and say, okay, let me take 1% and spend that time on myself here, because the better space that you are in will ultimately lead to better outcomes for your own families. The more present you can be, the better space you can be. And I hope that doesn't come across in any way as an insulting, but I mean, the better equipped you can be to be totally present and being able to serve and help your own family is going to hopefully set you up for greater success in terms of the outcome and recovery for your children. A really important bit around this, as we touched upon earlier on again, is around income protection. And it's not so much that it's during that time. So you might find that parents are saying, well, we have to step back from work. Our child is ill. You then return to work. But some of those compounding issues, those orthopedic, psychological issues that have built up over the last number of years while your child may be going through various treatments, can then catch at a time unexpected in the future. And you can see here, we see the top three causes of claims over during 2021 and 22 were due to effectively mental health, cancer, and then musculoskeletal disorders. And effectively what we're trying to say is parents are there trying to keep the wheels turning all the time. And potentially the beauty of an income protection policy, it does provide for proportionate benefits. If somebody physically and mentally isn't able to return to work and they feel they might be able to go back 1 or 2 days a week, The income protection policy acts essentially as a backup there to provide, to replace some of the income that would have been lost. Again, it's just to reduce pressure. It's allow people re-engage at their own time when they feel ready to do so. And in engaging, as you can see, with all those other previous additional benefits, to get themselves back right. The beauty of something like this is we tend to find when most people have an issue, when they find that there's a family member who's very ill, all the other bits for themselves stop. Things like pension contributions, which are going to be crucially important in the future. A lot of these income protection policies can also provide for a continuation in respect of the pension contribution. So it takes some of the pressure off somebody worrying, well, how do I, there's only so many ways I can split my income each month. Again, one relief that's there is that they know, well, at least I'm provisioning in the background into my own pension to provide a war chest for the future. And that's potentially at the needs of the individual relative to when they want to access it. But it's absolutely crucial that these benefits are understood and, if necessary, put in place to try and provide to ensure that you have that holistic sense of protection for you and your family. What I'm going to move on to now is section 2 and touch upon kind of budgeting and cash flow management for families who are in crisis. And again, I'm hopefully there's enough in this to cover off both from a financial advisor standpoint and also for the family. And again, what we tend to see with something like this, and most families on the call will be very, very aware of this, is that most people, when they're at their best and their family is at full tilt, it's really, really hard to get a control of our finances. It's very, very difficult. Most people are incredibly busy with their own lives. As we said, they're trying to manage mortgages. They're trying to get kids to and from school, and they're then trying to get themselves into work. And for most of us, get themselves into a GA or a soccer club or a rugby club or a dance class 8 out of 7 nights of the week. So it's really, really difficult to sit down and peruse and ascertain, well, what do our finances look like? And all of a sudden we get this major, major trauma in the family, and effectively any game plan that might have been there is effectively broken up in respect to what the finances look like. So again, in this case, we see a lot of things like unforeseen medical expenditures that might require overseas care. We see a lot of people have had to come along and top up their mortgages in order to put themselves or give themselves some breathing room. We see for a lot of families who are based outside of Dublin, the difficulty of having to travel up to Dublin from an expensive standpoint and then cover things like accommodation. And again, there's the difficulty with that. And in certain cases, that does require a reality check. So future plans that were there relating to potential private education, changes of cars, changes of house, holidays, all of a sudden there's a major rain check on these things. And we think one of the values that can be provided by way of engaging with a financial planner for these families is it just gives them somebody who can potentially engage with creditors to be able to put this stuff in a language that creditors can understand. And again, provide some breathing room for families to be able to say, okay, we know we don't have to deal with that directly. We have somebody there helping us. And again, to provide a written notice for their situation. And you'll see the graph on the right hand side here. And again, excuse the briefness of this. Most financial planners and financial advisors in the call will be very familiar with this cash flow software. But essentially what this is effectively somebody's financial life. And for the families on the call, it's really important that they can see this, that this is the level of scientific detail. And this is by no means in going into massive detail, but I just wanted to provide this as a screenshot to highlight to you the value a financial planner can bring by absorbing all of these incomes, outgoings, expected, unexpected things that might pop up in the radar, and feeding this into very highly sophisticated software, totally bespoke, and then allowing for an interactive meeting with the family to walk through and say, here's where we are today. Here's this chart that we're looking at the bottom. We need to get to the top chart. And here's some of the smaller bits that we can implement now to allow us get right within the short term to take some of the pressures off. Again, sometimes what we find is sometimes social support is overlooked, and most people dealing in these circumstances, families, friends, and the community around them are really, really willing and are actually so eager to come forward and give their support. And it's just being able, I think for most families, and again, not speaking out of school, but I imagine this can be very, very difficult sometimes asking for help. And I imagine it can be sometimes very difficult even verbalizing the situations that they're going through and sitting down with people and saying, God Almighty, I just do not have the energy to go through this again. you know, in most cases, employers, your community around you really, really want to support you in any way they can. And again, one of the biggest rationales and what we find where the element of professional financial advice is so beneficial, it allows people to not only understand their position and that they're in, but helps them navigate both the emotional and the financial aspects of these challenging situations. For us as financial planners, these are areas we're involved in on a day-to-day basis, you know, and albeit we tend to wear multiple hats in terms of being able to drift between various, you know, financial products. Most people, as I said, involved in this profession are so willing and of their time and willing to assist and give help wherever they can. One thing that people may not be aware of, and I just wanted to touch upon, is just in respect of the financial supports that can be provided from a kind of a gifting and inheritance standpoint. And again, this all relates back to capital acquisitions taxes and potentially what a family can do in terms of supporting people within their family unit in terms of what can be given as a gift or inheritance. This isn't to scare anyone on the call and say, God, you need to do an audit. But again, this is really relating back to the role of the financial planner is how can we ensure no mistakes are made, or how can we do an overall audit to make sure whatever is being done correctly, and ensuring that we're not going to get a kind of surprise or anything in the future from revenue where they knock on the door and say, hold on a second. One of the beauties of this thing is the state, so revenue and Department of Finance effectively allow what's called the annual gift exemption. And that allows any individual within the state gift another individual €3,000 per annum. Okay. And I've just run a really, really basic example here in terms of a granny and granddad may turn around and have additional resources that they might want to assist a child who is suffering from cancer in terms of assisting them for the future about maybe building an education fund or a deposit for a mortgage. Or it might be something like saying, well, we'd love when they get to 21, there's enough money in the kitty for them to get their first car. Granny and granddad can effectively, between them, set up a savings plan and gift the child €6,000 a year, totally outside of the tax net in terms of this. It doesn't fall under a capital acquisitions tax liability. I've just run a very basic calculation that if, for example, that was to generate a net interest rate return of, let's say, circa 3.5% per annum, the value after 10 years is close to €70,000. And this is the benefit. It doesn't need to be put into a savings plan. It could be put into a bank account, but it's just making people aware of what others can do around them to assist with the future education needs of a child, or could be treatment. It might not even have a title. It might be just what we call, in inverted commas, the Getting Better Fund. But again, that might take some pressure off the family who are now saying, we had to go on interest only on our mortgage for a number of months. So our plans for the future have been deferred. It allows family members in the community to come in and assist. Again, from a parent to child, an inheritance or a gift can be made of up to €335,000 totally tax-free. Any amount exceeding that is taxable at 33%. And you can see as we go down into category B, you can see a brother, sister, nephew, or lineal descendant can give a gift of up to €32,500. Sorry, I think that's actually slightly out of date. It's now circa about 34,500 or about 34. We'll get a correction on that one. And then again, for all other parties, so this is up to strangers, can give a gift of €16,250 as a one-off. So it's just really important. This might not be relevant to all people, but it's just important that you're aware of what's available to you. And if I just move on again slightly then, just around the professional support pieces, again, it's really important to understand the role for families and advisors in terms of which they play and how they can correlate with one another to get the best outcome. It's really important that families know that they have this trusted expert partner. And again, somebody who's really, really willing to engage beyond a transactional, but on a real relationship. They want to get to know you. They want to get to know your family, and they want to be able to, as part of doing that, give you guys the best outcome you can for the future. And it's plotting the course. As we always say, we know that getting from A to B is going to have a couple of breaks and junctions along the way. The financial advisor and partner is there to assist you on that. Again, this extends even beyond the space where they can provide additional support in terms of leading in other areas and helping families, assist them in terms of the structure of a will or potential things like guardian arrangements and the establishment of a trust. And again, as we touched upon in the last slide, some people may be tax experts in this space, but most of us have enough tax knowledge to know at a very macro level how we can kind of help people around the tax implications related to medical expenses, making insurance claims, and potential gifts from families. Again, we always recommend that a family under these circumstances needs to craft and have a clinic of trusted experts around you. You may currently have your own suite of these, but I absolutely kind of endeavor that you try and engage through the likes of the Gold Ribbon program and as we touched upon, ensure you are seeking the best advice. And my understanding, and Mary will touch upon later on, is that the amount of financial planners and advisors that came forward offering of their time is incredible. And it's a testimony to the profession, how willing those people are to come out and assist and help and provide as many resources they can to assist families in these circumstances. Again, this is really, really relevant to both parties, both the financial planners and advisors and the families on the call. It's really important about minding yourself. Again, only within the last 24 hours, I've gotten 2 phone calls in respect of people that were very close with our existing clients. One has been given 3 months to live and the other has been given 4 to 5. What we really need to do is ascertain we unfortunately have to deal with this news a lot. And again, sometimes we nearly have to be unemotional in terms of our approach. We need to be the anchor for the family to be able to say, okay, we know we're in very difficult circumstances. We'll be the ballast. We'll be the ones to come forward and assist when you're at your lowest ebb. I think I can't stress enough, but certainly from our own perspective, what we've learned over time, it's absolutely crucial that we're patient in terms of our approach of this with the families, and we try and garner an understanding of where the family is at. Each individual circumstances are going to be different. And again, it's important to take time to process the impact. And this is really important for the family. We touched upon it earlier on. The engine can only run when it's topped up with oil. And it's really, really important that we're assessing for ourselves and processing that own impact. And again, that might mean having regular check-ins with colleagues and with mentors and through the various resources that we'll touch upon in a minute that are available. Again, from an advisory standpoint, for those who may not be massively comfortable in terms of dealing with protection, I can't recommend enough potentially picking up the phone and having a conversation with underwriters and the protection specialists within the life insurance companies. They are an absolute fountain of knowledge in this respect. And some of the little minutiae, as I said, the 1% gains that can be earned. And here's the other major kickers. It allows for advisors and planners to build really close relationships with those individuals within the life companies, which means when the chips are down from family and something is needed in urgency, the planner can jump in and get onto somebody on first name basis, know them, and be able to hopefully action something in a little bit quicker time. Again, I think it's really important for everybody, both the planners and the families on the call, to be auditing your own policies. Go back and look and see what you have. And if you don't understand it, engage somebody who knows what they're talking about to come and assist you and see what's there. As I always say, even from a financial planning sense, there's no good in me. We can't tell people what to do. We have to show them. We have to show them what we have personally ourselves to try and assist them and trying to understand how we've tried to set ourselves up to ensure that they can get as much value then as well in terms of engaging these. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is for the families to engage with an advisor, just purely, even if it's to give you some breathing room and give you an opportunity to take a step back and just say, not that you're dumping piles of paperwork on somebody, but you might have that large pack of paperwork that you just feel, when are we going to get the time to go through it? Imagine the value of getting back a 1-page net worth statement. Here's where we are today. Here's where we go next. And here's how we can cross any bridges that we come across. Just for the purpose of time, I'd our own case study, but I'm going to just move beyond that. Just touch briefly on that, just in respect to the claim that was made in that case study. Is the specified illness claim is totally free of tax. So there's no tax applicable in respect to that. In that case, just very briefly, we had a payment made for a family whose child suffered from cancer, and a tax-free payment was received of 25,000 euros. For us at the time, it didn't feel like a massive sum of money, but it was only really when we kind of sat down after to see the emotional impact for the family. That was such a game changer for them at the time. We couldn't get over it. Like, the emotional response was incredible relative to the value that brought to them. So never overlook how little or small something might be. It's absolutely essential that we put value in it. Again, just touching upon some of the benefits that are provided, charitable supports from the CCI. And this peer-to-peer workshops, the parent workshops are absolutely incredible for parents to come in and sit down with trusted financial and clinical experts. And again, just give them an opportunity to kind of work out, well, mentally, where are we at? Have we emptied the cup here essentially, and how are we going to start filling it back up again? There are the various education workshops, and again, I don't want to go into this in too much detail because additional information is going to be provided, but we can't put enough value on just reaching out and trying to access as many potential supports and available bits that are as possible. Again, just in conclusion, from a financial advice and planning standpoint, I think the best thing we can do as advisors is stay as up to date as possible. And as most of you are doing, as we said, hundreds of hours of research every year. But I think it's really important sense checking. And as I said, building those trust relationships within the life insurance companies and having points of contact who you can liaise with to work it out. There's no rule book to this. This is not like setting up an investment plan or pension where it's a very straight and legislative process. Every family's circumstances are going to be different, and we need to be very empathetic and very cautious in terms of how we approach that to ensure we're giving to them as much as we can. It's really important that we step outside our own remit and engage with others within our professional network to see where we can engage. We're mindful of ourselves, and we have to be careful that this is a giving profession, and sometimes you can nearly give too much, sometimes to your own detriment, and we're of no value to the people we work with if we're running on empty. The families that we work with need 110% from us at all times. And again, as I said, we're all human, so simply caring can really make that difference. Being able to sit down and listen to somebody can hold a massive amount of value. And for the families on the phone, on the call, just again to give you that concept of the unwavering support from the financial advisors. It's that tailored guidance and the compassionate understanding to help you guys navigate the difficulties and the challenging times that you're facing. And it's ensuring that, again, that your number one priority for these financial advisors is your family's well-being at all times. Once, as I said, we're a family practice. We effectively live and survive on the betterment and well-being of the people that we work with. And we wouldn't be here today if we hadn't built and crafted, thankfully, so many working relationships with great people. I'm delighted now, just to finish off, I just left that quote there from Dr. Marius Bernard, again, the inventor of specified illness cover, South African doctor. So again, I think that's really important for the financial advisors in the call. But I'm delighted now to pass on to Stephanie O'Brien, who's going to run us through the section 3, which is the claiming entitlements, the grants and benefits section. So Stephanie, I'll pass over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Hello, everyone. Some of the families may know myself tonight. I'd just like to thank the LIA and CCI for allowing us the opportunity to present from social work here this evening. My name is Stephanie O'Brien. I'm one of the senior social workers here in St. John's Ward. We're a small team of 4.5 social workers, and we become involved with families, with children and with families on diagnosis for children who have an oncology or a hematology diagnosis, and they're beginning their journey on St. John's Ward. So tonight we have, after the presentation, at some stage there will be a resource pack that we have done, which outlines all of the practical and the emotional supports that are available to children and their families, and that's at diagnosis. It's also ongoing during treatment. Those supports may change, and also sometimes when palliative care is required, we also have a number of practical and emotional supports that are available. And I suppose it's important to note that the information that I'm going to talk about it's very much based on the social work service that we provide to families attending St. John's Ward, but it's very often very specific to the needs of that family at a point in time. So what one family may need is certainly not what another family may need, and it's very, as Mark alluded to earlier on, it's very much dependent on what supports and systems in place that families have to help them along this journey. I think it's important to note that citizens information is a very good resource and a guide for all of our families if they're looking to find out any more information about any of the supports that I'm going to talk about this evening. And for the purposes of this webinar, I've been asked to focus very much on the practical and statutory supports that are available. So those are the ones that I'm going to go through now, and I'm by no means an expert on state supports, but I'm happy to answer any questions later on if anyone has any. So if we could pop on to the next slide, Mark. I'm going to talk about the medical card for children. First of all, as many of our families know, all children who have been diagnosed within the last 5 years will get a medical card. It's completely different to the medical card application that many of us are familiar with. It's a HSE-led application, but it's not means tested. So no income or outgoings are required for this, and it's a very simple application. And in social work, when we meet families, we often give families a pack, and the medical card application is really the very first thing that we do with families, because it helps alleviate a lot of the stresses and the questions that are asked about particular medications, because it will invariably be covered under the medical card. So it's just something important to get done straight away if you can. So we fast track that for families, and we usually get a medical card for a child within 24 to 48 hours, and that lasts for around 3 to 5 years. So that's the medical card. The long-term illness scheme only applies to a child who has a diagnosis of acute leukemia. And again, it's something that you can hold alongside your medical card, and it really will entitle you to free medicines or medical or surgical appliances that may not be covered under the medical card that you have. Again, it's not dependent on income or any other circumstances, and you can get it alongside the medical card. And again, it's something that we provide to families within our resource pack when we first get to know families when they come to the ward. Just going on then to domiciliary care allowance. This is quite a lengthy application, and sometimes we gauge when to introduce it to our families, because they have to fill in so many forms initially, and it's certainly one of our longer forms that to fill in. But thankfully, most, if not all, of our families usually get domiciliary care allowance. And essentially, it's a monthly payment of €340 to the parent or carer for a child who has, it's referred to as a severe disability or an illness. But essentially, what domiciliary care does is the medical assessor is looking to find out if your child requires care and attention that is substantially over and above that of a child without that condition or with that illness. So if you get domiciliary care, you're automatically eligible for a medical card without a means test, but we find that often doesn't apply, because all of our children will get a medical card anyway. And it's something that we try our very best to support families with, to help them with the application, and we try to get that application in as soon as we can, because sometimes it takes a little while to process it. And again, it's not means tested. So that's domiciliary care. The Carers Support Grant is a grant that kind of goes hand in hand with the domiciliary care application. If you have domiciliary care, you'll often get the Carers Support Grant. It was previously known, and some families may be familiar with it, and been known as the Respite Care Grant. And it's a payment that's made once a year, usually around June. And last year, I think it was around €1,800 or €1,850 for a family to spend in any way that they wish, not necessarily on respite. And as I said, it's automatically paid to carers who are in receipt of domiciliary care or carers benefit or carers allowance, which I'll discuss later on. It's not means tested, and it's it's something that families really, really need, although it may sound like a lot. It really isn't, and but families are really, really grateful to get that payment. Okay, carer's benefit then is often something that we look at not during the diagnosis stage, but when families are kind of on their journey and they're in it for the long haul, really, and they're trying to decide about whether one person needs to leave work for a little while or not. And it's so we usually, it can take a month or two or longer to go for parents to be in a position to really know whether they should go for that or not. But essentially what carers benefit does is that it allows one person to leave work or to reduce their hours right down to care for their child who requires full-time care. It lasts for 2 years, and it's very much based on your PRSI contributions in the last couple of years. And I think last year it was around €250 per week. And then there was a child dependent rate on top of that, depending on the age of the child. So you can take up to 2 years, or you can take a number of separate weeks, and it's something that your employer has to fill out as well. So you just have to be quite clear and definite on your dates for carers benefit, and that can just take a little time to figure out when families first come to the hospital. So we try to support families as much as we can with that application. You can also make a claim for this application for if you claim for less than 6 weeks, then you must wait another 6 weeks to make another claim under carers benefit. But again, it's very much dependent on your PRSI contributions. And again, it's a lengthy enough application, but if you have domiciliary care, which most of our parents will have by that stage, you don't have to fill out the medical report piece in it. So we try our best to support families with that application too, should they wish. Carers leave is something that goes hand in hand with carers benefit, and essentially you get that through making your application for carers benefit. But carers leave allows a person to leave their employment for up to 2 years and for a minimum of 13 weeks to provide full-time care, with the idea that your job is left open for you to return to. My understanding is that you must have worked for your employer for 12 months prior to that without having taken a break. And you have to give your employer 6 weeks notice of your application for carers leave. The agreement is flexible, and you can apply formally in writing to your employer if you're not going down the carers benefit route. But the two tend, from my own experience, to go hand in hand. Okay, and carers allowance then is often a payment that families may think about after the 2 years. So when their carers benefit is up, and maybe they're in a situation where they feel maybe they can't go back to work yet, and they feel they need more time for one reason or another. The only difference now with carers allowance is that it is means tested, and it's essentially a social welfare payment, and your income has to be below a certain amount. Again, you can work, but you can't work for more than 18.5 hours per week and get carers allowance. And the child that you're caring for has to be under 16 and in receipt of domiciliary care. So there are some rules attached to it. And again, the weekly rate of that is quite similar to carers benefit. It's around €248, and then the child dependent rate as well. Alongside carers allowance, then that will qualify you for some other packages as well, like the household benefits package, which comes automatically, I think, with that. But again, carers allowance is probably a difficult payment to get because it is means tested. So it will go on the income of maybe if there is another person working in the household. moving on then to supplementary welfare allowance. It's something that we don't use as much nowadays, but it's again, it's a means tested application, and it's for families who are on very low incomes or who are in receipt of a social welfare payment. And it's for very specific reasons. So if you find that you have a high cost or a cost that you cannot meet within your household, for example, if it was an expensive bill, something that you just couldn't meet due to, and your circumstances were that you were in the hospital a lot, or you were really struggling, or it was a one-off payment for something in particular, you have to provide the proof of that. And we often support families in that, in terms of providing support letters, and that goes through your local Intrio office, and there's a very specific form that you can use to apply for that. All of this information is in our resource pack, and all of the contact details if families would like to find more information out about any of these benefits. And I suppose one of the last ones is the incapacitated child tax credit. Very much a lesser used support in my experience here in the hospital. And thankfully, because it requires your child to be considered permanently incapacitated, either physically or intellectually. I suppose the rule to apply is that your child needs to be considered unlikely to maintain themselves, even with the benefit of any treatment or medication or therapy. And it's a tax credit for €3,500, as far as I know. And again, it's for a child. There's an expectation that if that child were over 18, that he or she wouldn't be able to support themselves by earning an income. And that application form is available from Revenue as well. So they're really the main statutory practical supports that we would encourage our families to apply for, very much on a needs-led basis. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any questions in relation to those.
Super, Stephanie. There's actually there's two questions in there now.
Okay.
Question one is, how can you apply for the incapacitated child tax credit, and how long is it valid for?
I know that you can apply through revenue.ie. That's where you get the form, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not sure how long it lasts for. I can find out, no problem, and come back to that person if that's okay. But I think it has to be filled out by your GP or by your consultant as well.
That's super. Yeah, we'll get back to that person. I'll get the LIA to keep the contact details there. Just the next question that's there is, can you ask what happens if a child has sarcoma and is 14? The child is now 18. Does the cover stop?
The cover for what?
So the child had sarcoma, and when they were 14 years of age, now they're 18. So does the cover stop? It doesn't say what cover. They might just put in whoever that was, what type of cover you were talking about. It was probably about the state, I guess, support cover.
I know for, like, say, for example, domiciliary care, that stops at 16. And then usually it follows on the follow-on application after domiciliary care is called disability allowance. And that's means tested. So it depends on the income within the household. So that I'm not sure if that person is referring to that or not. But again, if they'd like to give more information, right, I can come back to them, Mary.
Yeah, no problem. And actually, that's exactly what they were relating to.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm guessing this will all be in the packs as well when they go out.
It's absolutely all in the pack, but it's a common question that we get as a child approaches their 16th birthday, because it's a brand new application for something that's actually very, very different, And as far as I know, I think the payment then goes directly to the child who's 16.
Okay. When they're 16. Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that brings other challenges, I think, as well.
It can. Yeah. And just there's another question, just probably for people that are on the call that haven't signed up, families who do they contact, that can help, or who do they reach out to?
In social work, they can come directly through the main social work department, and we'll try our very best to get back to families. Absolutely. And we haven't, like, everything is going to be in the resource pack as well. But if anything isn't clear, we're very happy to help families if we can.
Yeah, great. And actually, the next slide as well. I'm sure you've more to talk about, but there's loads of questions coming in. So what I'll do, Stephanie, is I'll hand it back to you, and then I'll reach out in the other questions then. Okay.
No problem at all. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, as I said, in our resource pack, which will be available to all families who wish to receive it, I go through a number of the emotional supports as well as the financial stroke practical supports that are available to families at different stages along their journey. But just to give it like a brief overview, when children come to St. John's Ward and they have a new diagnosis, they will meet a social worker, and we will go through all of the practical and emotional supports that are available for that family. It's a voluntary service, but we find that most families uptake on our service. Initially, when a child comes, and as you know, we provide a service all throughout Ireland, so really depending on where a family are coming from, and things are extremely difficult, and they're often in a state of shock and disbelief, and they just find themselves on St. John's Ward. There may be questions around accommodation, where can family members stay? So we have a number of charitable partners that we work with very closely, Aveen's Pink Tie, the Cancer Fund for Children, who really help us and assist us with the accommodation options that are available for children and families. If there isn't any accommodation available in Crumlin, we have Ronald McDonald House, and we have parents accommodation, which is a fabulous resource and a great help to families. But sometimes if families find themselves having to come up here very quickly, those charities that I've mentioned often help us with accommodation in the surrounding areas. Aveen's Pink Tie help us considerably with that. So all of those supports are available. They often come through social work initially, and then we reach out to our charitable partners to help us, and they take over from the accommodation perspective. In terms of travel, then there's a lot of services that help our families, again, very much down to our charitable partners. And they, for example, there's the Travel to Care, which is run by the Irish Cancer Society. And if a family need to travel more than 50 kilometers each way, they will get a one-off payment from the Irish Cancer Society. Again, this is an application that comes in our pack that's we give to each family here in the hospital, and we help families with that because there's a part that we have to fill out as well, and that's a one-off payment. We also have the volunteer driver service, again operated by the Irish Cancer Society, which enables a child and their guardian or parents. So one adult has to travel with a child to come to treatment if they need to come for bloods, for specific consultant appointments. And they also provide a car seat, and it's quite specific in terms of making sure that child has a car seat and it's their right fit in for their age and so forth. So there's some rules attached to it, but it really is an invaluable service for a lot of families who may not have transport or access to coming up to Crumlin, So, and that's something that's we refer to ourselves here. So we're the source of referral, or our nurses on the ward. There's certain nurses that can refer out for that. And again, we have other charitable partners, Aveen's Pink Tie, for example, who provide us with fuel vouchers for families who need to travel very, very long distances, often coming up for chemotherapy every week. So again, that's very much needs led and dependent on the resources and the supports that family require. We also have, touching briefly on the emotional supports. Again, this is very much covered in the resource pack, but there are no end of counselling and play therapy options available for for children themselves, when the conditions are right for those children to avail of play therapy, just in terms of coming to terms with what's happened to them, and any concerns or any worries that parents may have in relation to that in terms of any behaviors. And that's also for siblings as well, because often we forget when we have our children here, there are often siblings at home who are feeling quite put out by all of this, and are wondering why their mummy and daddy aren't spending as much time with them, and why their brother or sister are getting additional attention. So we often recommend play therapy as well, and that's available through the Irish Cancer Society, through Hand in Hand, and through a number of different organisations. And we try to signpost parents in the best possible way to access those services. Again, counselling and psychotherapy is also available, and we often signpost parents to the specific cancer support services that are available in their county. And it's very much dependent on whether that person would like online counselling or face-to-face counselling, and the type of counselling that they require, or psychotherapy. But we always reach out to our charitable partners in relation to that as well. In relation to treatment abroad, there's a very specific application for treatment abroad that we are involved with initially to help families with. The Gavin Glynn Association become very involved and are such an immense support and help to families who need to travel abroad, because they provide a lot of logistical and financial assistance, and the service that they provide is absolutely invaluable. So with consent, we would often refer to Gavin Glynn if families would like that. There are also a number of palliative care supports that I've referred to that will be available in the resource pack. A lot of those supports are very much charity based as well, and they are both emotional as well as practical. And I'm very happy to answer any questions about those supports. Just in terms of grants that may be available on a statutory basis, there aren't that many. I'm not familiar with any. Like, certainly you could make an application through an exceptional needs payment for a family, but they would have to be on a certain income or in receipt of a social welfare entitlement. But we would often use our charitable partners and foundation here in Crumlin as well to access palliative care grants for families. Again, that comes through social work. This is just a snapshot of some of the charities that we work very closely with, and there's so many, and it really is amazing, because there is such a support to all our children and to our families. And again, as I said, they're going to be in our all named in our resource pack, and a lot more charities as well, for information about the supports that they primarily offer to children and to family members. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone would like to
Great,
ask
Stephanie,
anything.
there's loads of questions in. So I better get started.
Okay.
So the first question is, do you know when treatment finishes, does the carers allowance stop, or must you inform the welfare?
I think it's personally down to we certainly don't inform anyone, from here in social work. We just wouldn't be able to do that. But I think, often parents wait a little while. I don't know how long, but they often ask us that question, and we say, well, look, if your circumstances have changed, then it's important to let carers allowance or carers benefit know that. But as far as I know, there's no specific time frame on it. I know, for example, with domiciliary care, the illness or the condition has to last for at least 12 months, and then sometimes your payment is reviewed. But I'm not sure about about carers allowance, if there's an actual time frame on it, Mary.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's brilliant. Thanks, Stephanie. So the next question that's there is, can a child get a renewed medical card after it expires, or is it means tested?
We've never had, we have reapplied for medical cards, and if a child is still attending here and they've had their diagnosis within the last 5 years, absolutely, we can reapply. We can reapply.
Super, perfect.
Yeah.
And just another question there. So does the child dependent allowance from carers leave give an extra allowance for just the diagnosed child, or is for each child in the family?
Say that to me again. Sorry, does the
child dependent allowance from the carers leave give an extra allowance for just the diagnosed child, or is it for each child in the family? So I guess, is there extra allowances for the other kids in the family, not just the diagnosed child?
I think it depends on how many child dependents you have,
Yeah.
So like if you have more than one, I think the rate goes up. Absolutely. Yeah. So everyone's circumstances are different. So it's something that you would need to check. But yeah, and it depends on the age of the child as well, whether they're under 12 or over 12. You'll get if slightly more for a child over 12.
Yeah, great, no problem. And then another one that came in there. So do these services apply only to patients from Crumlin, or do they extend to a child or young adult aged 23 years attending St. James's for treatment?
No, it's not just Crumlin, but some of the payments may be specific, for example, to an age of the child. But carer's allowance, you can be a carer for an adult and be in receipt of carer's allowance, for example. It very much depends on the benefit or the allowance that we're talking about. For domiciliary care, it's up to 16. For after that, it's disability allowance right through adulthood. So it's very much dependent on the allowance or the benefit that person is talking about. But as I said earlier on, citizens information, actually, they are so good. If you're looking for some information specifically on carers allowance, for example, it will go through all of the rules on it and how to apply, and give you a link to actually apply on, and also a number. Sometimes we find if we want to support families, if they have any questions, and we ring carers allowance or carers benefit, they may not be able to give us any information due to GDPR and that. So we often try and empower families to make that call themselves, and just to have their PPS number to hand when they do.
And brilliant. Thanks a million, Stephanie. And just the answer for the medical card came in. The medical card is actually rolled over. It's not means tested, but it's reviewed annually after 5 years. Yeah. So yeah, brilliant. No, just do you have more slides there, Stephanie? I'm just conscious of the time, so I just want to share some of the links with the.
I don't have any more slides. Nope.
Yeah, perfect. No, I'd like to say obviously a big massive thanks to Mark and Stephanie for their excellent presentation this evening. For LIA members who would like to get involved with the volunteering program, we'd love to hear from you. More information is available. I think Mark is going to share the links there. Yeah, you can see them on the screen. So you see www.lia.ie/membership/gold ribbon volunteers. And also for all the families who would like to receive more information on these new services available with Childhood Cancer Ireland, you can also contact the financial support at childhoodcancerireland.ie. So you see it up there on the screen. And just a reminder that part 2 of our financial pathways through childhood cancer webinar will take part at 7 o'clock next Wednesday, the 28th of February, featuring Mark as our sole speaker for anyone who hasn't registered yet. So get on it and register, please. So we'd love to see you next week. So part 2 will cover post-treatment family financial planning. It will also cover CAIA, cancer survivor financial planning, and the right to be forgotten directive. And it'll also cover estate planning and guardianship for long-term care. So we hope you can join, and thanks for watching. And thanks Mark and Stephanie again for being involved. It was great. And everybody on the call, I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks very much.